Now, when it comes to pocket knives, there tend to be two camps. Those that are looking for ultralight, slim and slicey blades, and if the color pattern matches your wardrobe, all the better. And then there are those who view their pocket knives as more than just pocket jewelry and look for durability and reliability because this tool is going to be put to the test on a daily basis. And listen, there's no judgment here. I cater to both camps in my pocket knife reviews. But we're going to be focusing today on arguably one of the top dogs in the overbuilt heavy-duty folder arena, the SOG Seal XR, and their newest rendition, the TI model, which cuts 20% of the weight off of the original. It's sporting a brand new USA-made MagnaCut steel. We're going to find out what the Rockwell is on this, though. And you get 3 separate handle scale options for customization. So we're going to unpack what this model brings to the table compared to the original that I reviewed when it came out, how it stacks up compared to other top dogs in the heavy duty arena like the BENCHMADE ADAMAS and the Cold Steel AD10. And I'll be revealing one accessory that basically is a requirement in order to get the full potential out of this design. It's going to be a blast, so welcome. If you're new to the channel, I'm Aaron. This is Gideonstactical. Let's dive in. Now, arguably one of the hardest tasks any pocket knife is going to be expected to do is stab, pierce, and potentially pry with that tip, and that's where we often see failure points with thinner, slicier blades. So what does the SOG bring to the table, regardless of steel? Well, it has a flat grind that goes up 7/8 of an inch onto a 0.19 thick stock. That stock thickness is probably the thickest pocket knife stock I have in my collection. And what that means is that transitions into a good piercing but durable tip. And when I put it through my standardized 2x4 tip test where I stab 5 times with some lateral side to side, it passed with flying colors. No chipping, breaking, bending, or anything else like that. Now, don't treat your pocket knives like screwdrivers and crowbars. They're not designed for that, and you could potentially break the tip off of any blade, fixed blade, or pocket knife. But this is able to handle that type of abuse easily, and it's much more trustworthy than thinner, slicier blades. Now, in tandem with that, when I did other piercing tasks, this really penetrated well into the yoga mat, giving deep penetration on something dense like that. So it's not just strong, but it's going to also be piercing as well. So how does the rest of the blade perform, regardless if you already have the S35 VN version or you're considering the MagnaCut steel? The geometry of the blade definitely matters, and there are aspects that really perform well, and there are some that are a little bit expected, but not impressive. And when it comes to the good, I was really pleased with the cardboard slicing for how thick and broad it is. It didn't bind up, and you can actually move through cardboard relatively quickly. You aren't going to mush up and mash up like a tomato. You can slice limes, those type of things. That just shows edge geometry is actually better than you might expect for how thick the blade is. And then obviously like rubber and cordage and paracord, that type of stuff. And I was shocked at how well this actually carves wood. The geometry is excellent for feather stick making and using it if you had to make a notch and do those type of things. So depending on other aspects of the tool, this might be a great pocket knife to take camping if you want to do some basic woodworking with a folder. The areas where it didn't perform as well, and I was kind of expecting this, was like, especially against zip ties, you really had to do multiple strokes and really put a lot of pressure on it just because of how broad the blade is, as well as like hemp rope and things like that. There was more sawing than a thinner, higher, slicier grind would require in cutting. So you have to determine, do you prefer the big, broad, and you may have to put more pressure on the blade, or is thinner and slicier actually better for the type of task you want this blade to do? Now we'll circle back to the MagnaCut steel, its HRC, and how it stacks up to the original S35 VN, but we got to look at this XR lock, the durability of the locking mechanism. Now, SOG claims it's rated for 1,500 pounds of downward force, but what does that really translate to in real-world application? And it's about time that we do some spine thwacking, batoning to really see how this stacks up compared to, say, like a Triad or Atlas lock and some locks like that. And the watch that is telling me it's time to do that test is today's sponsor, which is Vaer Watches. Now, I first came across Vaer Watches several months ago when I was wanting to upgrade my field watch collection. And when I began to read the specs and see the features of their C5 solar field watch, I was sold. And this is accomplished through a Japanese Epson solar movement, which means with 6 hours of light, you get 6 months of reserve power, so you rarely ever need to replace the battery. And this is just one of the many designs and power options that Vaer watches offer. They also have Japanese quartz movement and automatic movements to choose from. So I'm gonna have a link popping up here as well as in the description box below where you can start exploring all the different options and designs to really dial in the perfect model for you. Guys, after a couple months, I can't say enough good things. I'm very impressed with what these watches bring to the table. So I encourage you to check them out so that you can have an excellent timepiece on all of your upcoming adventures. Now, really, how tough is this XR lock? Well, thankfully, we do have a massive stop bar right there. And then the lock, boom, is also nice and broad. And then we have those titanium scales that go all the way around the housing. And then we got that large pivot. And when I started smacking on this thing, batoning with it, in the same way that I've tested out Atlas locks and Recons with the Triad before, thankfully, this was able to easily split that like 2-inch piece of wood, pounding on the spine multiple times. Excellent to see. There's no play, there's no wobble, there's no rocking. And then just for good measure, I wanted to do some spine thwack, so I thwacked this thing, and it absolutely did not hop, jam, have any sort of issues like that. And we've seen other similar crossbar style locks fail. The M-Lock from Microtech jumped the spine right away when I did a spine thwack. And so this is definitely a well-built locking mechanism. Now, what's really nice is that this is a very strong detent. There's a little bit of back and forth movement, but you really got to pull to overcome. It's not going to whip itself out. Most crossbar locks don't have a lot of detent, and you can easily, without even touching the blade, whip it open. You're not going to be able to do that with the SOG. Now, what about that one accessory that basically you need to have to get the most out of this pocket knife? I'll highlight that in a moment along with ergonomics, but what about this MagnaCut steel? Well, what's really awesome, guess what? HRC is 62 to 64 on the MagnaCut. Excellent to see. Good job, SOG. Benchmade, take note. How that stacks up to S35EN. It's basically, and I love S35EN. There's nothing wrong with that steel. Prior to MagnaCut coming on the scene, it was one of my favorite steels that the original model comes out with, or came with, but I believe it was Rockwell 58 to 60 or maybe 59 to 61. Anyway, it's going to be a lot lower. And so basically, what you're going to see out of MagnaCut is just an upgraded steel on every level. It's going to have better wear resistance. It's going to have better durability. And in my personal experience, you can still resharpen it with a simple like Work Sharp field sharpener. You're not going to need some specialty kit to hone and maintain the edge. It's not as difficult as say M390 or 20CV to try to maintain MagnaCut. So I think that is an excellent steel choice, and I'm glad they went with an appropriate HRC. Now to the thing that's going to make or break the design, the ergos, and that one accessory that is basically a requirement. Now, the original model is over 8 ounces, if I remember correctly, the stainless steel, which is one of the heaviest pocket knives known to man. Heavier than your Recon 1s, heavier than the Swift 3. I mean, that is a heavy, heavy blade. You could throw it at somebody and knock them out. So to have titanium and have it milled out, bringing it down 20% to 6.2 ounces makes it a lot more carryable. It's a lot more enjoyable to use, and you're going to notice the difference. So I believe, along with the MagnaCut, that is a really good choice to really kind of cut some of that weight. Now, if you have the original and you're in love with it, maybe there's not really a need to do it, or you do want to really upgrade. But if you don't own either and you're looking at the two models, the upgrade, you're also going to pay in price. We'll talk about that in a little bit with those competitive options. But there's definitely a lot there with the steel and with the basically almost 2 ounces removed. Now the they're not G10, they're glass reinforced nylon scales. It comes black, but they give you 2 more. They have great instructions. It's going to take about 15 minutes, but it was easily done. I didn't have any issues doing that and swapping out the scales. So you'll get like a like a coyote, an OD green, and then you're going to have your standard black. So you can really kind of customize and dial in. Is that like, ooh, no, but it's a cool feature and I really like it. And I immediately swapped it to the coyote tan, and I feel like it goes really well with the design. Now, I'm a firm believer in geometry over texture for traction. If a knife has appropriate geometry to keep you locked into place, you are more confident and it doesn't need a bunch of jimping and texture all over the place. Texture and jimping, yes, they give you something to grab onto, but they can create hot spots. And this knife has phenomenal geometry, way better than a Puko or something. So you're gonna feel confident really putting a hard pressure, cutting and slashing and doing whatever you need to with confidence. And they have basically just copied, give a shout out if you own it, God bless, the SOG Seal Pup. This is the elite version. They basically copied the cut-ins and then with the extra flipper design, I mean, you are so locked in geometry-wise that you have full confidence. I mean, they could have made this like as slick as an Nalgene bottle and you would have been totally confident in the grip. Here's the deal. I wouldn't say it's a cheese grater in your hand, but it could be close when you don't have gloves on. The jimping, just like the original across the spine, is super, super aggressive. They have jimped the entire bottom into the guard, and then you have that diamond pattern right there. I really wish that they had just done literally what the SOG Seal Pup has, which is smooth on the bottom and then light ribbing on the top. If they had honestly even just kept the bottom and then made the scales flush with the jimping, so you would have felt something, but it wouldn't have really been as brutal. It's fine if you're doing quick cuts and doing that type of stuff, but if you start bearing down on it, like on hemp rope and rubber cuts is when I really noticed it. I mean, it just eats up your hand, man. I mean, it ain't going anywhere. It definitely ain't going anywhere, but it creates hot spots and you're kind of like, can I get done with this task and stop putting this much pressure on the knife? So it's a double-edged sword because on the flip, the one accessory that basically is a must-have to get the full potential out of the knife are gloves. If you have gloves, this knife is phenomenal and one of the best pocket knives you can own for gloved application. They probably should have just pitched it that way from the get-go, because even their marketing says, like perfect grip with gloves or not. I don't know about that. With gloves, absolutely. And what's great is because the flipper is so large, the grip points on the lock are so pronounced, it makes it so easy to deploy with bulky gloves, even my winter gloves. You are so locked into place, you're not going to feel the texture and the jimping. And so if you live in Arctic climates where you wear gloves a lot, or maybe your job just requires that and it just makes sense that you're wearing gloves most of the time, and in the past you've had difficulty finding a folder that operates and functions well without having to take your gloves off, this is the tool. I mean, this is the knife that you heavily need to consider. Without it and without gloves on, I still carry it and use it from time to time, but I just know what I'm getting into, and you have to be prepared for insane levels of traction and texture when you're doing hard cuts. So I want to know, because I know there's a whole community of people who love the original, and I know that are getting their hands on this. What do? Are you a person that just uses gloves constantly, or are you somebody that you just gotten used to it? Maybe, I'm a wuss, I don't know. Leave a comment below, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. So now, what about value? What is it gonna cost to get into something like this, and how does it stack up to those competitive options I highlighted earlier? Well, I requested this sample from SOG, and as always, showing you what I really like, and maybe some aspects that I don't, namely, depending on how you wanna use it, the ergonomics. Keeping it real, as always, with you guys. Now, this is gonna cost a pretty penny. $300 is the normal going rate for this blade. Now, when we look at titanium, American-made MagnaCut, and all of those things, it's definitely right there in the ballpark compared to other similar designed, large, overbuilt folders like this. Now, I know SOG actually does sales pretty regularly on their site, so you can always go check that out and you can kind of hunt around, but that's usually the going rate. The S35VN versions, you can sometimes score for like 150, 160 bucks, depends on who, what, when, where, why. So that's definitely something that you got to consider. But the normal going rate's about $300. So for $300, what potential alternatives, and I'm going to have links for all these, you know, below to the affiliate networks I partner with. If you're looking for just like a better value and better ergonomics without gloves, the AD10 from Cold Steel. Triad lock, brutal. It's not going to be as fast and action-packed, but nice and full. Big in the hand. Broad blade, not as piercing either. S35 VN, and they have lots of color palettes now. You can even get some with like black and green and tan and black. Usually about 135, made in Taiwan. Excellent blade though, and kind of similar size, broad, big, beefy, overbuilt tool right there. That's a great kind of high value option. And then if we, of course, look at the ADAMAS, this has crew wear. It's going to be like $325 if I remember correctly. It's actually going to have like a lower grind but thinner stock, so they're going to probably perform cutting wise pretty similarly. And you know, the action that you have now, again, even though it's got some high traction points, it's just more comfortable without gloves on. Loop over, ambi, this is, you know, ambi as well. But that's another option right there, kind of in the same price range, if not even a little more expensive. So guys, upgraded steel, cutting some weight, customizable handle scales, definitely brings a lot to the table, but keeps the same super aggressive ergonomics as the original. So leave a comment below. If you own the original, how has it been holding up for you? How do you deploy it? If you have the new one, where does that stack up for you? How has it been working for you? I always appreciate your guys' feedback. And if you are looking for a gloved pocket knife folder, it's like top dog. I mean, I can't think of a better option for you. If you're not using gloves, it definitely is one of the top dogs in overbuilt capability, but you have to determine if it's worth the extra traction or not. Thanks for hanging with me today, guys. I hope it's been fun, entertaining, giving you the data that you need. Check out the other videos, subscribe if you haven't, and until next time, always remember, stay equipped, stay prepared, and I'll see you out there.